Many businesses scrambling with new challenges after the CDC's relaxed mask guidelines caught them off guard. Delta Airlines CEO says that all new hires will have to be vaccinated before starting their jobs. This comes as the U.S. Space Force relieves a commander officer after he published a book about the spread of Marxism and critical race theory in the military. And while masks started coming off across the country, the CDC is still recommending schools keep the mask mandate in place for children. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. To mask or not to mask? That is the question many businesses are grappling with after being caught off guard by the CDC's relaxed mask guidelines. Let's kick off with some updates. Masks started coming off in major cities across the country. This comes after the CDC relaxed mask guidelines last week. But the CDC is still recommending schools keep the mask mandate in place for children. The CDC saying in its latest guideline, all K-12 schools should implement and layer prevention strategies and should prioritize universal and correct use of masks and physical distancing. The CDC said masks should be worn at all times by all people in school facilities and buses, adding that teachers and students should maintain 6 feet of distance between them. Right now, there are no vaccines for children under 12. The FDA recently approved Pfizer for emergency use in children 12 to 15 years old. Some states seem to be taking a different approach. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster issued an executive order last Tuesday. He allows parents, not schools, to decide if their children will wear masks at school. He said at the time, everybody knows what we need to do to stay safe, including wearing a mask if you're at risk of exposing others. But we must move past the time of governments dictating when and where South Carolinians are required to wear a mask. Maintaining the status quo ignores all of the great progress we've made. The CDC said last week fully vaccinated people do not need to wear masks outdoors and can avoid wearing them indoors in most places. Now, companies are taking different approaches to that news. Many businesses caught off guard by the shift. Starting Monday, Target and Starbucks joined a growing list of retailers ending mask requirements for fully vaccinated customers. But it still depends on local or state law. Walmart, Costco, Trader Joe's, and Publix say no masks required for customers who are fully vaccinated. They were among the first ones to change their in-store policy after the CDC's announcement. Among those still on the fence with no plans to drop the in-store precautions are Home Depot, Gap, and Ulta Beauty. Masks stay, vaccine or not. Fully vaccinated means 2 weeks after getting the second shot of either Pfizer or Moderna or their single shot Johnson & Johnson. Before the announcement, these states in red already did not require masks. States in blue updated their stance after the CDC's update, and some, like California, are still reviewing. And for the first time since the pandemic, Disney World in Florida is saying masks are now optional for guests outside. But masks must go back on for inside attractions like Space Mountain. According to the CDC, almost half of the U.S. population has gotten at least one shot. That's as of Saturday. The agency adds around 37% are fully vaccinated. As for the Capitol, 34 Republican lawmakers are calling on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to lift the mask mandate in the House. Ohio Representative Bob Gibbs leading the effort. He urges Pelosi to follow CDC guidelines, adding in the letter, the United States Congress must serve as a model to show the country we can resume normal life through vaccination. Let's follow the science and get back to work. Gibbs went on to say in a statement, it is time to set an example for the American people. He goes on to say the House of Representatives is filled with enough political drama, adding the last thing we should be doing is contributing to vaccine hesitancy with the same Mask-Erpiece theater Congress engaged in during Biden's address to the joint session. Reports say Pelosi has opted to keep the mask mandate in place for the House floor. Pelosi told CNN after the CDC update that she has no immediate plans to lift the mask mandate. And her spokesperson told Bloomberg she isn't easing the requirement because it is unknown how many House members and their staff members are vaccinated. Speaking of vaccinated members, let's turn to airlines. Delta Airlines CEO says that all new hires will have to get vaccinated before starting their jobs. CEO at Bastion tells CNN any person join Delta in the future employees, we are going to mandate they be vaccinated before they can sign up with the company. The company released a statement with slightly different wording, saying that new employees will have to be vaccinated unless they have certain accommodations. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission says it is not a violation for companies to mandate vaccines, but exceptions have to be made for people with disabilities or religious objections. The commission released official guidance in December, saying once an employer is on notice that an employee sincerely held religious belief, practice, or observance prevents the employee from receiving the vaccination, the employer must provide a reasonable accommodation for the religious belief, practice, or observance, unless it would pose an undue hardship under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Bastion says it wouldn't be fair to force current employees to get a vaccine. He says he is not going to mandate and force people if they have some specific reason why they don't want to get vaccinated. But he adds he would strongly encourage them and to make sure they understand the risks of opting out. Unvaccinated employees may have to be tested weekly and could be banned from working international flights. Bastion says that over 60% of Delta employees have gotten at least one shot. He expects 80% will eventually get the vaccine. Most U.S. companies do not require vaccines. No other airlines have announced vaccine requirements. This comes as Americans seem to be flying more than at any time during the pandemic. The Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, says it screened 1.7 million travelers last Thursday. That's about 36,000 more people than Sunday's previous record. But one trade association says last week's volumes are still 36% lower than last year. The CDC loosened mask requirements last Thursday, saying people who are fully vaccinated do not need to wear them indoors anymore. But federal rules still require everyone to wear them on planes, trains, and buses. Now, staying on the topic of airlines, let's turn to other topics in space. The U.S. Space Force removed a commanding officer from his post. That's over a book he published. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier served as the commander of the 11th Space Warning Squadron. The Space Force told news outlets over the weekend it relieved Lohmeier on May 14th due to loss of trust and confidence in his ability to lead, saying they are investigating whether his recent comments in a podcast constitute partisan political activity. Lohmeier's comments were likely in reference to the spread of Marxism in the military. He detailed this point of view in his recent book called Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest, the Unmaking of the American Military. When Lohmeier appeared on the podcast Information Operation to promote his book, he criticized Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's agenda. After Austin was confirmed, he ordered a stand down to deal with alleged extremism in the military. Lohmeier said the diversity, inclusion, and equity industry and the trainings we are receiving in the military is rooted in critical race theory, which is rooted in Marxism. He goes on to say, I don't demonize the man, but I want to make it clear to both him and every service member, this agenda, it will divide us. It will not unify us. Lohmeier told Military.com he had consulted with his higher-ups before publishing the book, adding his intent was never to engage in partisan politics, but rather to spread awareness about the rise in polarization in the military. He said, I have written a book about a particular political ideology, Marxism, in the hope that our Defense Department might return to being politically nonpartisan in the future, as it has honorably done throughout history. Lohmeier's book topped Amazon's military policy section after the news and is currently sold out. Neither the Space Force nor Austin's office immediately responded to a request for comment. Now, let's take a moment to cover the issue of communism, or Marxism. If we look at the founders of the communist doctrine, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, they wrote, the theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property. That's from the Communist Manifesto, a book that forms the basis for communism. Professor of Political Science at Grove City College, Paul Kengor, told the Epoch Times in an interview, abolishing private property can only be possible through a war, because private property is a basic Judeo-Christian law. Natural rights, biblical rights, thou shalt not steal. He said on the Crossroads program, to abolish private property, you are going to have a war on your hands. You are going to need guns. You're going to need gulags. Therefore, communists killed 100 million people to abolish private property. Is that likely to happen to the rest of the world? According to the World Economic Forum's 8 predictions for the world in 2030, one is that in 2030 people will own nothing and all products will have become services. Kangor went on to say the Communist Manifesto also demands the abolition of all religions, all morality, and the abolition of the family. That's the opposite of what America was built upon. If we look back at the Declaration of Independence, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.